What is the deal with Harley-Davidson?
Hey Rachel, that's it's a kind of complicated question. Hi everyone, this is Rob from Intended Consequences. On this episode of Pursue the Ride, we're going to tackle the ongoing, divisive, and heavily opinionated question of what is going on with Harley-Davidson these days. Harley-Davidson is one of those iconic companies that have transcended their product and entered a lexicon of national image. Like McDonald's or Starbucks or Levi Jeans, Harley-Davidson is internationally recognized as a symbol of what being an American is all about. Here at home, they've had over a century of success and longevity that has propelled them into the gold standard to which all other motorcycles are compared and what defines success of a motorcycle company. Like it or not, fair or not, no other motorcycle brand invokes as much love and hate as Harley-Davidson. Hit the graphic. You may, or may not, have heard that Harley-Davidson has been in a long slide financially and has worked itself into quite a predicament, and that was before the COVID pandemic started. To get a decent idea of how bad things have gotten, we need to put things into perspective. Harley-Davidson has a very long history, starting back in 1903, and I'm not going to go all the way to that point, but I think for the purpose of this video, we're going to pick up in the 1990s. These were very good years for Harley-Davidson, as the largest segment of the population at the time, the baby boomers, were rolling into their late 30s and early 40s, buying motorcycles left and right. This trend continued up through the turn of the century until the 2008 economic crash. Primarily considered luxury items in the Western world, the motorcycle industry took a massive hit during that period. Things started to look grim for Harley-Davidson in the years following. As the motorcycle industry began to recover, they really didn't, at least not as quickly. To make matters even worse for them, their longtime and historic rival, Indian Motorcycles, re-emerged on the scene after being acquired by Polaris. Harley-Davidson hit its last real peak in 2008 with the launch of their More Roads Lead to Harley-Davidson campaign, and has been generally trending downwards ever since. It wasn't that the More Roads idea was bad, it's just that it was very ambitious, expensive, and a long-term approach, and that just didn't land very well with investors or to the public. The wheels really fell off when the COVID pandemic took hold and sales dropped to near 2008 levels. Harley-Davidson's CEO was sent packing along with the More Roads initiative. Out of that quagmire came a new CEO and a new plan, the Rewire, which, as of this video in August 2020, has resulted in the trimming of 700 employment positions and a call for a 30% reduction of motorcycle models. Despite all of this, Harley-Davidson motorcycles are still the most recognized motorcycle brand and saturate the roads even to this day. But ask any critic of Harley-Davidson why they aren't doing so well, and often the same three reasons, or myths, come up. So let's talk about that. Myth number one: Harley-Davidson riders are old people and are dying out. Well, I can't really argue that riders grow old and die, but let's peel back the layers on this one. Certainly, Harley-Davidson got a considerable bump in sales during the baby boomer peak of the 90s, and I will also agree that the next generation, the Generation X, has not surged motorcycle sales in the 2000s. But we can also agree that the 90s didn't have anything quite like the economic crash of 2008 and then the COVID panic of today. That isn't a realistic expectation, and it's oversimplistic to compare the two eras. The thing about getting older is that every year, everyone gets to do it. So let's talk about that. Harley-Davidson sells cruisers and touring motorcycles, and these bikes are designed for comfort, which is something you start thinking about more and more as you get older. Sure, a young guy or gal can crush some track days on a sport bike, but does anyone really believe that a 40-year-old is going to enjoy curling their spine up on that thing or rattling their fillings out going off-road? Maybe a few might, but for the majority of us, we're going to have to be honest with ourselves and the toll our riding preferences take on our bodies. For a lot of people, Those late 30s and early 40s is when the body starts to betray you, and suddenly comfort sounds a lot more appealing than raw performance. Yes, we are beginning to bid farewell to our baby boomers, and their love with Harley-Davidson is notable. But there will always be a market for motorcycles designed for comfort. And there's also something to be said about the age when most people find they can afford a more expensive motorcycle, which leads me to myth number 2, Harley-Davidson is overpriced. Now this one is one of my favorites because it demonstrates a failure to understand how competitive markets work and how people will say things without doing homework on their own. Don't worry guys, Professor Robb has you covered, and we are going to address this myth right now. For sake of time, I'm going to take 3 popular Harley-Davidson motorcycles and compare them to their approximate equivalent from a rival brand, taking the starting prices right from their respective websites. I am very aware that there can be some perceived bias with this, but I'm going to try to do my best to be as objective as I can. So let's start with the 1200cc-ish Sportster style. We're going to compare the Harley-Davidson Iron 1200, the Indian Scout Bobber, and the Honda Fury. As you can see, the Harley is not the most expensive motorcycle on this list. But hey, those are lower tier motorcycles. Let's look at the 1800cc-ish cruiser style bikes. Let's compare the Lowrider S to the Indian Chief Dark Horse to the Kawasaki Vulcan Vaquero. As you can see, the Harley-Davidson is middle of the pack of price. Last, let's look at the mid-range touring style. We've got a Road Glide, Indian Challenger, and Honda Goldwing. Now the Goldwing blows them both out of the water, and that's because there's a lot of stuff going on with the Goldwing. But if you look specifically at the Harley-Davidson and the Indian, we're still talking about the same price. As you can see, all these motorcycles are comparable in price in relation to what you would be getting. Sure, you can nitpick it to death, but generally speaking, Harley-Davidson is no more expensive than any other popular brand. Now, if you want to argue that Harley-Davidson's entry-level motorcycle, the Street 750, was overpriced compared to other entry-level motorcycles, then yes, this is true simply because other brands have smaller motorcycles than the Street 750. Priced at $7,500, the Street 750 is rather pricey for a first motorcycle, but no more expensive than its Honda counterpart, for example, the Shadow 750, which comes in at $7,600. Oh, and the cheapest Indian is the Scout Bobber 60, which starts at $9,000. Anyway, most critics would chime in right about now and declare that while the price might be competitive on paper, Harley-Davidson motorcycles are lower tech and lower quality than the rival brands, so it is overpriced for what you're getting. But that brings me to myth number 3. Harley-Davidson motorcycles are slim on technology and reliability. I'll start with the concept that Harley-Davidson motorcycles are low tech. As with everything else, this needs to be put into context. The main complaint is a lack of LCD or the newer TFT displays that come with many other brands. Essentially, large cell phone touchscreens, TFTs allow for riders to use a touchscreen to control riding modes and other features on their motorcycle. That's a fine thing for a motorcycle that uses these types of features, but when it comes to Harley-Davidson, the question becomes, are these features necessary? And if they are unnecessary, why would you want to pay for them anyway? Does a Sportster really need riding modes? Do cruisers really need digital tachometers? These are more indicative of personal preferences than industry standards. And to that end, the larger touring Harley-Davidsons absolutely use touchscreens incorporated into their bikes, so it's certainly an option when there is a need. For the rest of it, ABS doesn't come standard on a lot of motorcycles, not just Harleys. Not every motorcycle really needs cruise control. Not every motorcycle needs a full fuel gauge. Not every motorcycle needs to display what gear you are in. And again, these are preferences and not industry standards. And a lot of Harley-Davidson motorcycles have this technology too, just not in every model, which is also just like every other motorcycle manufacturer. As for the lower quality, Harley-Davidson got a bad reputation back in the 1970s for partnering with AMF, the bowling alley equipment folks. and their bikes did have a lot of problems. That partnership ended though in the 1980s, and good riddance. Since then, there have been ups and downs as Harley-Davidson, like any other brand, has innovated and hit bumps here and there. In 2005, Consumer Reports did a massive survey among all motorcycle owners involving most brands and found that Harley-Davidson specifically was mid-pack when it came to reliability. Fair enough, not the best, but also not the worst. So Harley-Davidson's consumer base isn't all dying out. They aren't the most expensive motorcycles. They have technology when they need it, and they are reasonably reliable. So why are they still on the hot mess express, and what could they do to get back on the right track? Well, the first thing any business needs to do to expand is to diversify into other markets. In this case, into other types of motorcycles. For me, Harley-Davidson's biggest weakness has been its stubborn refusal to sell anything other than cruisers and touring motorcycles. Look at this lineup. You've got dozens of variations of what essentially is only a handful of frames. Now it appears as if Harley-Davidson is already heading in this direction with the release of the Pan American, an adventure motorcycle, in 2021. Sure, it's 10 years late to the party, but at least it still exists. The Bronx, a street fighter, which is basically a naked motorcycle, which is basically a stripped-down sports bike, may or may not survive the cuts related to the rewire, but we'll see. Personally, I think cutting the Bronx would be a mistake. In fact, I'd love to see a Harley-Davidson in every type of motorcycle. Look at these other brands. Notice anything? It's diversity. Kawasaki offers something for everyone. And so does Honda. Even Indian, doing their best to follow in Harley-Davidson's footsteps, at least has a street fighter already of their own in the FTR 1200. In my opinion, Harley-Davidson is just so marketable that any bike with the iconic bar and shield logo affixed to the side will sell. They should trust their brand and expand their lineup into markets where they've never really been. And no, I'm not counting the Buell fiasco. Harley-Davidson absolutely should not do. And what I'm hoping they learn from with the Buell affair is buying a smaller company's superior bikes and watering them down purely to make money will not win over any new customers. The second thing I would do is incorporate an online ordering system to purchase motorcycles online and then have them delivered directly to the customer. Car companies like Carvana have already cracked the code on this, and there's no reason why this shouldn't expand motorcycle sales. There are nearly 700 Harley-Davidson stores across the United States, and it's a good bet that some potential customers would have to travel a long way to purchase a new bike. Purchasing online would reach those rural customers and provide a workaround for those who are either distrusting of salespeople or have some COVID concerns. Third, and the last thing I would do is I would do whatever it took to get the prices of my motorcycles down without sacrificing quality. This can be a hard pill for the America to swallow, but Harley-Davidson got sucked, or willingly entered, depending on which version you believe, into our nation's politics back in the 1980s with President Reagan and never looked back. Sure, it's nice to have the President of the United States throw down some free publicity, but there is a cost that is paid for that too, especially in overseas markets, which we all know influences prices here at home. Get out of politics. Focus on the product and the brand, and do whatever you can to deliver a quality motorcycle to your existing and future customers at a reasonable cost. So there you have it. In our estimation, that is the deal with Harley-Davidson. There are many videos and articles out there covering this subject, so if this whets your appetite, there's plenty more out there, and so long as Harley-Davidson is in business, there will continue to be new content published religiously. As for this video and us, well, this has been our take on Harley-Davidson in the past and heading into the future. Almost certainly a year from now, this video will be dated, and maybe we'll do a follow-up. If it isn't already clear, we like Harley-Davidson. And while our enjoyment of the brand isn't blind loyalty, we still own 2 Harleys now and will likely purchase more in the future. We want Harley-Davidson to be successful, innovate, grow beyond what it has been and currently is. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. But if we were betting folks, we'd bet favorably on the motorcycle company that has been selling motorcycles around the world since 1903. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. And remember guys, keep the rubber side down, and I'll see you next time.